for years, and you have to pick up the material and put it into the chipper, and after a while it's just too much labor and energy for what you're getting out of it. And so the tub grinder is really a good way to put the material through fast, and you never handle it by hand. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of material to farm with it.
You know what's so interesting about this? Track with me. I came across this revelation the other day. These wood chips, when the wind blows, don't move.
No, they stay there.
And they're lighter than dirt.
Exactly.
You track with that. That's bigger than me. And I love it. It's nature. It's so awesome how the creator designed this. I mean, there's no tilling, there's no digging, there's no... This is it. This is the only tool I need. Man, it is awesome.
My roses love it.
Everything loves it. Well, I just went to the place where they make all this good compost and got a nice load of it. The last time I put this here was about 3 years ago. And I think with this application, it'll probably go maybe 4 or 5 years. I'm finding that this stuff is like compounding interest. It gains in time, and you have to put less and less down as time goes on. Look how the leaves, I just love the color of them, and just how succulent and healthy they are. There it is. There's 2 words I want you to think about when you come here. Sustainable permaculture. Everything you see here was created in nature for free, and it's renewable. It was for liberty Christ came to set us free. Everything about God is free and sets free. And I love that about his character, and it's so beautifully just exemplified and shown in nature. This is just so freeing, and I love that scripture where he says, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest." Now you have to ask the question, why do we labor? And why are we heavy laden? It's because of the fall. He says, "Take my yoke upon you." And what do we use the yoke for? That's what attach the oxen or the animals to some device to cultivate the ground. And Jesus says, "I don't do things like you. Follow me around and learn from me. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." And in this incredible environment, in this thing that God has created, he shows his magnanimous, awesome, giving, generous nature. And it is so beautiful in comparison to the man approach of tilling and putting back, constantly being on a treadmill running, never getting on top of it. All these wood chips just sit here. I don't do a thing. Anytime I choose to plant, put a seed in, it totally thrives. If I don't use it, it just waits for me and develops, richer qualities. And in the meantime, it doesn't blow away, it doesn't turn to weeds, and it just stays. Where conversely, anything that I do, if I don't stay right on it, maintain it, I lose it, kind of thing. I'm a slave to it. And again, it's just this incredible quality of God of just setting us free. What I find quite interesting is that the issues we have in agriculture, and I'll just list them: soil preparation, fertilization, irrigation, weed control, pest issues, crop rotation, pH issues, none of those issues exist in nature. And what I'm finding at my place, none of them exist here either. And I feel just so thankful to be set free from that. Soil preparation, when you put the wood chips down, they never compact. They're always soft. Every year I come out to my garden, all I need is my rake and just grade it out, make a little groove and plant my seeds. because the air is always present, because it never compacts, it never has to be prepared. You come to a place where you've got, you've garden, and your garden at the end of the year is all hard again. So you bring in this really nice organic material, fertilizer, manures, whatever. You till it in. You got this really fluffy, nice, aerated material. And you're so happy. Oh, what a nice garden! You get out and you rake and you plant. Your stuff comes up. As the year progresses, when you get to the end of the growing season, that ground is right back to where you started. It's all compacted and hard again. And here's what happens. I use the example of a fire. To get a fire to go, you have to have 3 ingredients: ignition, fuel, and oxygen. In the soil, nitrogen is always present. That's the igniter. And when you bring in raw material, the fuel, and to get it there, air follows, it all burns up. You don't see smoke, but it all burns up.
There's a number of different ways to use the material. If you take the raw grindings and mix it in with your soil, it'll rob all the nitrogen out of the soil to rot the wood or rot the material. So you don't really want to do that.
So I tilled in these beautiful potato chip wood-colored orange wood chips into my garden last spring, and I wasn't too successful. My soil test says that I'm way down in nitrogen. Because I tilled those wood chips in, I tied up all the nitrogen in my soil. But now I know you never till this stuff. You just add to it, which was the mistake I made. So by getting the faith back and going back to what Paul has taught me, I think this is going to work because it just is simpler, right?
Basically what soil needs to survive is the same as us. It needs air, it needs water, and it needs food. It's a basic principle for all life. And so when you take mulch, for example, which is true in the forest, because there's not just one grade, like someone didn't go through and sift it and it wasn't always all coarse material or it wasn't all fine material. There's all what they have like macro pores. So there's all these different air pockets through the soil. And so what that does is it keeps the top part of the soil and even further down oxygenated. And so there's that oxygen available, the microbes and the earthworms come up into the soil, and then they can actually deal with that material and break it down. Normally when people think about mulch, they might think about what they call bark nuggets, which are just big chunks. It has to have different sizes of actual material. You have to have small grades, you got to have things like needles, you got to have things like chips. You can't have just one standardized size and expect that to do the same as what, I mean, if we look at what Paul's got here and I dig down, there's probably, I don't know how many different sizes of chips all the way down to what the finished product is, which is soil or organic material to the point where it's, I mean, that's what you're going for. Now, if I took and I multiplied this by a couple hundred times and that's what I was using, it would break down, but it would take a lot longer, and the ability right away for it to help out diminishes.
I started off with alderwood chips, which are kind of big potato chip sized chunks of wood.
This has been here a year, and it hasn't broken down yet. So I don't think this is what Paul's talking about.
It would have taken too long to break down.
And the other main thing that they're finding with a lot of different trees, grasses, plants, vegetables, compaction levels. A true healthy soil is not compacted, and when it does get compacted, it loses the oxygen, like those macropores we were talking about. And you get an area where it becomes what they call anaerobic, which means the oxygen level is too low for the microorganisms to live.
We're dealing, as I said earlier, with compaction here on our farm, and certainly we're growing root crops to help alleviate that problem. What we're also doing is adding wood chips on top, knowing that they're going to break down slowly over time, create fines, and also work into this compacted soil. So it's kind of like a passive tilling almost that's occurring, which is a really exciting prospect to think that we don't need the heavy machinery or the heavy disturbance. We can just keep adding and it'll work itself out.
I have used the raw grindings, and there's a number of people that do this, is just keep it on the surface. You're basically sheet composting, and it's more of a mulch than a than an additive to your soil. I have a tendency to compost between 10 months and a year. The compost itself, once it's composted, and then it's a screen material, you can use that several different ways. You can plant straight in it, which is, there's a lot of people who do that, or you can just leave it on the surface as a mulch. Compost does a lot of wonderful things besides just nutrient benefits in your soil, worms and beneficial fungus that's in there. You'll just see the plants just love it.
Fertilization, because of the compost material, every time it rains or you water, compost tea is being deposited into the soil, so you have a constant input of fertilization going on. Just not having a fertilized feature, to me, is just so amazing and such an incredible gift in this kind of stuff. And last year I had such an incredible experience, a real revelatory time. I had planted a row of spinach in the spring, and it came up really nice, and we enjoyed it. And I pulled it out and planted another one. It came up, the next one came up bigger and nicer than the one before. And then I was getting ready to pull it up, and one of my neighbors was talking about this black Spanish radish that was so good, so I planted that for her. And that came up, and she couldn't believe the size and how beautiful that was. And I'm looking at this, and I'm just contemplating what's going on. And he says, now God, talk to me. Every time I planted in the same row this year, each one was bigger and nicer than the one before, and I didn't fertilize. This is so opposite of what my experience is in gardening. Whenever I planted something, something was taken out, I had to put something back. And here I'm putting nothing back, and each planting is bigger and nicer than the one before, you know. And I hear him say to me, it was so incredible, in Romans 1, he says, the invisible attributes of God are clearly seen by the things he's made, so that no one has any excuse not to know God. And so I just started taking it in and says, look, God, what invisible attribute are you showing me here? He took me to Philippians, where it says, and my God shall supply all your need, not from his riches, but according to his riches in Christ Jesus. And what he's saying there is that when he gives, he makes no deduction. He makes no withdrawal. He is the same. And he says this compost is illustrating that quality of my character. It gives, and it gives, and it gives. And there's no withdrawal. There's no negative. It just continually gives. And that's who I am.
These leaves are falling down, and the idea is they're feeding the soil back. So they're done. So at this state, the chlorophyll is going out of them because they're going dormant. They're going to drop these leaves that still have nutrients, and the reason they're changing color is that green chlorophyll is gone, the pigment. They drop down in, and they're feeding that soil, and they're mulching it by their own. I mean, we're not coming over here and taking the leaves off and mulching below them. And if we go over here, or we go out in the forest, they're doing the same thing. So, I mean, they've been developed over these eons to do it, and so, I mean, why question it? Obviously, that's what wants to happen. And when you go out, and someone might say, well, that's not true with grasses. You go out into the grass field, let's say the prairie of the Midwest, there was grasses that were over my head, but underneath it was mulch from the grass. You know what I mean? It wasn't just green living grass with nothing out. There was mulch, all those blades of grass that had broken down fed the grass. There's nobody that goes out there and fertilizes that. I mean, that's the thing that people always say, well, you got to have fertilizer. You have to fertilize. Or, I mean, if there is no out, you're not taking it away, you know, it's all going back. The animals were eating the grass, and it was still going back. So if you can recreate that in a garden, it's the same exact thing. The leaves come out, they do their purpose, they go back into the soil. It's really simplistic, and sometimes the most simplistic things are what people don't like to accept as being the answer.
Whenever you buy fertilizers, there'll be three numbers or three things that they're analyzing in the fertilizer. It's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Nitrogen is what gives the green, the good vigorous growth. The phosphorus is what creates the budding and the flowers and the fruit production. And the potassium is what gives hardiness and health and strength to resist disease. And all those things are important to be in the soil for the health of the plant. Chemical fertilizers, even though they have the numbers that say they're adequate in these features, do not have minerals, and so the plants that are growing without minerals don't have those in them, so they don't have the nutrient qualities that plants that grow in organic soil do.
The minerals simply aren't there in the soil anymore, and so it'll take up what it can get, but it isn't there to be gotten, and so you end up with a fruit or a vegetable or whatever it is that simply isn't as nutritious as it once was when we had more fertile soils. Just the sort of calcium, magnesium, potassium, iodine, those kinds of things, the things that aren't fertilized typically,